Welcome to the Jack Yates High School Community Forum. I'm your host, Monica Jacobs, and today my guest is Michelle Ostrander of the Houston Area Women's Center. 1 in 5 high school students reports experiencing physical and or sexual abuse in their dating relationships. 60% to 80% of all rapes involve acquaintances or friends. 1 in 14% of the cases reported, the rapist is a close friend of the family or a family member. Women are less likely to report a rape by a friend or a relative. Welcome to the show, Michelle. How you doing?
Good.
Could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I'm the manager of education and training at the Houston Area Women's Center, and part of that job is coordinating the Teen Dating Violence Project. I'm going out and speaking to the community about domestic violence, about sexual assault, and sexual harassment. I've been involved in the movement to end domestic violence and sexual assault against women and children for about the last 5 years as a volunteer and as a staff member.
Okay. When exactly was the Houston Area Women's Center established and by whom?
It was established in 1977 by a group of volunteers here in Houston, both men and women. And it started first with a hotline. And that hotline was for general information referral for the community, but they were so overwhelmed with calls from battered women who had nowhere to go for safety that the next year they opened a shelter for women and children. And that first shelter had 11 beds.
Okay. How did you become the manager of education at the center?
When I started at the center, I was working on our hotline. And we have a 24-hour hotline. It's 528-2121 for survivors of domestic violence. And I began working in that area, and then eventually I moved into the manager of education training.
Okay. What do you do as manager?
I do a lot of public presentations to the community, to church groups, to community groups, to students. We do a lot of professional in-service training to law enforcement, physicians, lawyers, about domestic violence, about sexual assault, and sexual harassment.
What kind of services are offered at the center?
We really have 2 primary programs. We have a program for domestic violence survivors that includes women and children, and also men. We have a shelter that provides safe refuge for 45 women and children. They can stay there up to 60 days. In addition to that, we have a non-residential counseling program. And that's a program where we have individual and group counseling for the survivors. We have support groups for adult females, for their children. We have a support group for teen girls who are battered by their boyfriends. We have a support group for lesbians who are survivors of domestic violence. In addition to that, we have individual counseling for all of those individuals, plus individual counseling for males who are survivors of domestic violence. The other primary program is our sexual assault program, and that also has a hotline 24 hours for survivors and their friends and family members, and that's 528-7273. That hotline provides crisis counseling intervention for the survivors. It also provides volunteers who can go out to the hospital or to the court systems with survivors. If you have been sexually assaulted, it's really important to go to the hospital to get yourself checked for your safety, and also to get a rape collection kit completed. We have several volunteers who go to the hospitals and meet the survivor there. In addition, we have individual and group counseling for survivors of sexual assault. We have groups for adult females, survivors of incest, for teen girls who are sexually assaulted, and for children who are assaulted by non-family members.
What kind of cases, what kind of people walk through the doors of the Houston Area Women's Center?
All kinds of people. There's not a typical case, either with sexual assault or with domestic violence. It ranges in ethnicities and ages, socioeconomic status. It just
so there's no basic percentage of who comes through the doors and who gets help or whatever. No. It's just everybody.
Yeah, the people who come into our center represent the community. And I mean, they come from all aspects of the community. It reflects Houston's diversity.
What is the worst case that you can remember seeing?
There's all kinds of horrible cases, unfortunately. Probably the most horrific cases that stick out usually involve the children. Children who have been, sexually assaulted at age 2 and 3 years old, who have been abused. We had this one little boy who insisted on sleeping with a cookie sheet covering his body, and he was about 5 years old, because he was so afraid of being molested by his father. And those are really sad cases when the children are that fearful.
What usually happens after the person leaves the center? Do they usually go back to the dangerous environments from whence they came?
Sometimes women do go back for a whole host of reasons, but we also have a lot of successes where they leave the shelter, find more permanent shelter. We have apartment complexes that will allow our residents to pay a reduced amount of rent for a certain amount of time. We work closely with other homeless shelters in the community to help our clients go into more permanent shelter. So we have successes, but we also have women who go back.
Is it a large number of victims that come from broken homes most of the times?
Again, they come from all kinds of homes. If children were raised in a violent home, meaning either they were abused themselves as children, or if they watched their father beating up their mother when they were growing up, they have a higher likelihood of repeating that behavior as adults. It doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be batterers or rapists or whatever, but they have a higher likelihood of doing that.
Why do you think that most of the victims go back to the homes? Is it a feeling of security or fear?
A lot of times it's fear. A common threat that batterers make is that I will find you and I'll kill you, and if I can't have you, no one else will. And if you pay attention to the newspapers, to radio, most of the murders that occur in domestic violence situations occur after she's left. It's an ex-boyfriend, it's an ex-husband, it's someone that she's been separated from. So the fear is a huge factor, and somehow they feel safer being with him despite the abuse than his threats that he's going to kill her. Other reasons include economic reasons. Most women who come into our shelter come with absolutely nothing. I mean, they're lucky if they can grab their purse when they leave the house. They're fearing for their lives and children's lives. So they're really rebuilding their life, starting a new job, finishing their education. All of that financial aspect plays into reasons for going back.
What is the success rate that the center has with helping women that have been abused or battered?
We don't follow up on our clients because of safety, and we always let them know they can always call us back if they want to return to our shelter or continue through our counseling program. So I don't have a percentage rate to give you,
okay.
But we know that a lot of women do successfully leave and lead safe and violent-free lives.
Okay, you attended St. Bonaventure University in New York. How are the cases there in New York different from here, and what did you study in New York?
When I was in college, I also volunteered with a program that provided services to women and children who are battered. And the cases really don't differ. It's a lot of the same stories over and over again. So I don't think it differs geographically.
What is the usual typical story of a woman that has just come into to the doors?
Into our shelter? Usually when it happens in violent relationship is, we don't fall in love with men who beat us up. We don't do that. But what happens generally, kind of the typical scenario with a domestic violence situation is that the man is very overwhelming. He tends to buy flowers, be very romantic, provide her with lots and lots of attention, which is very pleasing to get all the attention initially. But what happens in a violent relationship is that attention turns into jealousy and possessiveness, and ultimately control of that individual. And usually a violent relationship will start with verbal abuse and will continue to escalate until there's sexual and physical abuse.
So those are the basic warning signs of a person that's about to become abusive?
Some clear warning signs is jealousy and possessiveness. If that person is very jealous of you going out with your friends or what you wear, who you can call, if they call you all the time at home or at school to make sure they know where you're at, if there's a very quick involvement in the relationship, he wants you to make a commitment very soon, usually too quick. If he ever has made threats or he's ever used physical violence in the past, those are real key signs to look for.
I know as a teen that many teenage girls are faced with something like this and they won't go tell their parents. What can the parents look for that their child is being abused by a boyfriend?
Obviously, if there's physical abuse, any kind of unexplained bruises, need to pay attention, and don't simply accept some lame excuse. Continue to question and probe your children. In addition to that, if she's no longer going out with her friends, if she's spending all her time at home or with him and no one else, if he calls the house continually to kind of find out, make sure she's there and check up on her, those are some signs to watch out for.
Okay, I understand that you're a volunteer with the Pivot program. What exactly does the Pivot program do?
The Pivot program is a counseling program for men who batter. It's basically a group counseling format. It's an 18-week program, and it works towards making batterers accepting responsibility for their own actions and not blaming their partners.
Okay. Some teens don't know the definition of sexual assault or rape. They get it confused. What are the basic distinctions between those two?
It's the same. Sexual assault or rape is the same thing. The key to it is if you've given your consent or not. If you have not consented to sex, then it's rape. And just by being drunk, that doesn't mean you give consent. If someone coerces you or threatens you into giving in, that's not consent either. So if you have not given consent clearly, said, yes, I want to do this, then that's rape.
Okay, most abusive relationships start off with a power struggle where, you know, most of the friends think, well, you're being a wimp or whatever. How can a person tell that this is not right, you know, and what should they do?
It's true. A lot of men and teens who batter are kind of egged on by their friends. You know, who wears the pants in your family? You know, treat her. You know, you're in control. All those societal pressures to act like a man and to be macho in our society push men into doing things that maybe they normally wouldn't do. Again, the key signs to look for are if he's threatening you, if he's ever been verbally abusive, ever used physical violence in the past, if he's real jealous and controlling. Those are warning signs. You should step back and reevaluate the relationship.
When most young males start to batter, is it that they've been living in a family where they've experienced that, or they've seen their mother getting beat up so they think it's right?
At times, yes, but not in all cases. There's a lot of batterers who grew up in very violent-free homes. And there's also young men who grew up in homes where they did experience child abuse or domestic violence and choose not to batter as an adult. So your likelihood of engaging in violent behaviors is higher, but it doesn't make you become a batterer.
Okay. With the Pivot program, what kind of counseling does the people get? What kind of counseling do the men get that batter women?
The primary goal of the Pivot project is to increase the safety of women. And they do that by making men accept responsibility for what they're doing. That kind of is the key to changing their own behavior. What batterers tend to do is blame others for their violence. You know, if only you had not gone out with your friends, I wouldn't have had to yell at you. If only you wouldn't wear that see-through shirt, I wouldn't have had to, you know, punch you in the eye. Turning it around and blaming them for the violence. So a real key in the very beginning of the program is for them to accept that what they're doing is their responsibility and only their responsibility. And from then on, they work to provide alternative behaviors to violence and to figure out how to be non-abusive.
Okay, what kind of shelter is provided to the battered women?
We have a shelter. It's a safe emergency shelter. That means that the criteria are she's battered and she's in immediate danger, or her children are. They can stay there up to 60 days. I think sometimes when we think of shelter, we think of these rows of beds and a real sparse environment. But we have a home that was converted and enlarged, and each family has their own bedroom. We have a living area, a communal dining room for the residents. When they come into our shelter, they're immediately assigned a case manager, both the adults and the children, and they immediately work on their goal and their plan at that point in time and work on it through their stay at a shelter.
How long does the case manager stay with the person? Is it up until the 60 days that they leave, or do they stay until?
The case manager starts working on them as soon as they come into the shelter and continues throughout their stay.
Okay, so that's usually a remainder of 60 days. What happens after the 60 days if a woman has no place to go? Is she allowed to stay in the shelter?
In special circumstances, yes, we can extend the stay. However, we have really good relations with other transitional programs in Houston, so we're usually pretty good at allowing or kind of getting her into a more permanent living situation. If she can get into a transitional shelter, that means she can usually stay there up to 2 years. And our shelter obviously is very temporary.
Okay, I've been to the Houston Area Women's Center just visiting, and I see that y'all have a lot of security. What is the purpose of all of that security?
We have 4 locations at the Women's Center, and the one that you visited was our main counseling education building. And we have security cards. You can't get in through the front door without this special card. We have metal detectors for weapons. The reason for that is to protect the safety, to protect our clients. we know, again, that the most dangerous time for women is when she tries to leave the relationship. And most batterers assume that our shelter is located at our counseling building, which is at 1010 Waugh Drive, and it's not. Our shelter obviously is a safe shelter, so we don't publish the address or the phone number. But we have had batterers coming to our main office looking for their partner.
After these messages, we'll be right back to the show.
How many of you can say they've got complete trust in their girlfriend or boyfriend?
It wasn't just, males, as a lot of people think, but because he was my best friend, it was hard to trust anybody.
I trusted him with everything, and he took advantage of me like that.
I wasn't really worried because I trusted him, and I should have been because he used that against me.
Welcome back to the Jack Yates Community Forum. My guest today is Michelle Ostrander. When we left, we were talking about how teens should look for signs of abusiveness when they're about to become in an abusive relationship. A while back, I visited a Houston Police Department that deals with teen domestic violence, and she was telling me that the laws of abusiveness haven't been strict enough until 1985, and I was wondering, have the laws become more strict that you've seen, or are they still the same?
We're making progress every legislative year here in Texas. And last year, the last session, 95, we passed several laws that helped make it easier for women to get a protective order. It actually created a protective order that will protect teens for the first time. So I think we're continually progressing. We're not where we need to be yet, but we're getting there.
And where do you think the laws need to be?
We need to hold batterers responsible. That means that they're arrested, that they're convicted, that it's treated as a serious crime, that they receive mandated counseling, jail time, in addition to monetary fines. Most of the cases, in a first-time offense, a person's going to be put on probation, and that's probably it. So we want to make sure that battering and domestic violence, assault, abuse are seen as serious crimes that they are. Somehow we've treated stranger assault, if you're walking down the street and you're assaulted by a stranger, as much more serious than if your partner assaults you, and they should be treated equally.
When prosecuted, exactly how long does a person get for abusing, say, a family member or a wife?
Again, usually the first time they're not going to have any kind of jail time. It depends on the severity of the assault. If it's using hands but there's no weapon involved, then I think the first charge is a Class A misdemeanor. If a weapon's involved, obviously it's an aggravated assault, and that's more serious.
What signs should men look for to let them say, well, I'm about to become abusive, I need help? I just need to stop doing what I'm doing.
If they're trying to control their partner, their girlfriend, if they're not allowing the girlfriend to go out with her friends, if they don't trust them, if they think they're being very jealous. A lot of times girls who are in an abusive relationship say they can't even talk to a friend of the opposite sex. So if a guy is exhibiting those kind of behaviors, he needs to stop and step back and say, wait a minute, what am I doing?
Have you ever had a case that has ended in death, or someone has gotten seriously hurt or maimed?
There's been many cases that has happened in the United States. Every day 4 women are killed due to family violence. That means the men who are professing to love us are killing us every single day. And it's not just adult women, it's also teen girls who have been killed. And they're very much at risk also.
Do you know statistic-wise how many women are being abused daily?
Well, the FBI estimates that every 15 seconds a woman is battered and abused. So that translates into huge numbers.
Why do most women feel that it's their fault that they're being abused? Some of their friends will say, it's his fault, you shouldn't blame yourself, you need to get help, he needs to get help. Why do most women blame themselves?
I think our society tends to make women more responsible for making relationships work. The seriousness of taking a marriage vow and making a relationship work out is one of the reasons. But there's a whole host of reasons in our culture that makes women blame themselves. And we've had several cases where women have come in, they've been in marriage counseling, they've seen a psychiatrist, psychologist, and the psychiatrist is sitting there asking her, what are you doing to make him beat you up? Totally putting the blame on her. So a lot of professionals are still doing that. as well as friends. A lot of times when women first reach out for assistance, talking to their physician or their minister, they can't believe this person's a batterer. Well, maybe he did, but I'm sure it was just a mistake. He didn't mean it. Why don't you go back and try a little harder? Kind of pushing her back in the relationship and not giving her the support and the condemnation of the batterer that's needed to occur.
At the center, do you have any professionals like psychologists on hand to help a woman that has just come in?
We have, our counselors range in their degree and their experience. We are really a feminist grassroots organization, and we believe that battered women don't need long-term therapy. It's nothing that they're doing wrong. It's that they ended up in a bad situation, and this batterer is the one who's responsible for the violence. So what we do for women is we provide support, resources, a safe place for them to be and to live, in the hopes they'll continue to live a violent-free life. We do have individuals who are licensed professional counselors, but we don't require certificates or PhDs to do counseling at our center.
There have been a lot of movies and a lot of hype about people getting battered, like the movie What's Love Got to Do with It, and I know A Different World did an episode where a girl was getting beat up. Do you think after those shows have aired that more women are starting to come into the centers?
I think the awareness that we've received in the media through TV shows, through movies, through famous cases like Warren Moon locally, it's bringing a lot more awareness about domestic violence. And we are getting calls from people who are referring directly to those cases, to those shows. So it does have a positive effect.
Okay. If a girl goes to a party and she finds herself drunk and she tells a boy, no, I don't want to have intercourse with you or whatever, and the man forces her, what should she do after she has just gotten raped? What is the first thing she should do?
The first thing is get yourself someplace safe. If you're still at that party, get a friend to take you home, call a parent, call a friend, call the police. The next thing you should do is go to the hospital. You want to go to the ER room and you want to be examined. After you've been sexually assaulted, you're at risk for sexually transmitted diseases, for HIV infection, and for pregnancy. And you want to make sure that that's treated. In addition, at the hospital, they'll do a rape collection kit. That's a very intrusive kit, but what they're doing is they're collecting evidence from the rape. So they're collecting evidence underneath your fingernails, inside your mouth, etc. And even if you don't plan on pressing charges, you don't think you probably won't do that, it's really important to get that collection kit done in case you change your mind in the future. Because if you do change your mind and you don't have any evidence, it's your word against his word, and that doesn't hold up very well in court. After you've done that, go to the police, let them know if you choose to do that. Then, call someone, call a counseling hotline, tell a trusted adult, tell a friend. It's a very heavy burden to carry by yourself. Rape survivors, especially with acquaintance rape, tend to blame themselves for the situation, and it's not their fault.
Is that the reason why most girls don't say anything about the rape?
That's the very reason. They blame themselves for the rape. If only I hadn't gone to his room, if only I hadn't drank so much, I should have known better, I should have known not to trust him. So putting the blame on themselves.
What can a girl do to avoid a situation like that?
It's really important for girls and for guys to communicate clearly about their expectations. If you're going out with someone, if you're dating someone, make sure they know what you want in the area of sex, how far you want to go, what your expectations are, so it's real clear. What happens a lot in date and acquaintance rape is miscommunication. He thinks because you're going out to his room that you want to have sex, and she thinks that she's going up to his room to talk and listen to records. So that clear communication needs to be there. And males, if they're not sure what she wants, then ask. Don't assume that no means yes, or that she just doesn't want to have a reputation, or whatever those assumptions are. If she's not clearly saying yes, then you need to assume she means no, she doesn't want to have sex. It's also important to limit your consumption of alcohol and drugs. Make sure you know what your limits are, if any, because you need to have a clear conscience, a clear head, so that you can clearly say, I don't want to do this. But it is important to note that even if you do all of these things correctly, you could still be sexually assaulted. And even if you do all these things correctly and you're assaulted, it's still not your fault. Okay? It's not your fault that someone chose to rape you.
When women are raped, most of the time it happens at school or on campus and in a college. Is that the highest rate of rapes that occur on college campuses?
Well, girls are more at risk during their junior year, high school year of high school, and their first year of college. And that's primarily because you're testing your independence. If you go away to college, you're on your own for the first time. There's usually a lot of experimentation with alcohol, new people, you don't know anybody. So those are really dangerous years for young girls.
Okay, on a lot about battering. On the O.J. Simpson case, a lot of people were saying, well, O.J. beat his wife. Why didn't Nicole go get help? And all kinds of things like this. Why do you think that, this situation went on for so long when so many friends say they knew about it?
Actually, she did call for help several times. And I'm sure you've heard the 911 tape where she called the police. What happened with O.J. was that he was mandated counseling, but they made it so it was telephone counseling. He didn't even have to go anywhere. He received no jail time. He didn't even finish his counseling program. So it didn't send a clear sign to him that what you're doing is wrong. But actually, Nicole did everything right. She did call the police. She left him. She tried to live a life away from him.
Do you think that since O.J. Simpson was set free, more women are less likely to call in than they would be to call in?
I think the O.J. case did several things. The primary thing it did was raise awareness about domestic violence, which was very good. And O.J. was deemed not guilty of committing the murder. But we do definitely know that he was a batterer. And that sent a very poor message to women when they were doing the car chase. There's all kinds of support for O.J. And that tells better women something. That what they're experiencing is that important.
Some of O.J.'s supporters were women. Do you think that some of those women were being abused themselves and felt that it was right that he was doing whatever he was having to do?
There's a lot of women who do believe in the myth that men have the right to control their partner. With the O.J. case, there was the issue of race and the blatant discrimination of the police department, which I think kind of covered everything, obviously, that was so blatant. So I can't clearly say what they were thinking in that instance.
I think the media has a lot to do with what women think about battering, because a lot of videos have come out about beating women and beating this. Have you ever had a case where a man was beaten or anything like that? Do you know of any cases like that?
We've had several men who have called our hotline for assistance. It's important to note that you can be battered and abused and threatened by weapons. It doesn't necessarily, you don't have to be 6'5" and have your partner be 4'2". It can be with words, economic abuse, and also you can use weapons to threaten someone, to control them. So we have had those cases of men calling. Not that many, obviously. And in fact, most of the cases that are reported, I believe 97% of the cases reported to law enforcement agencies nationwide is male abuse on female. So that's the majority of the abuse that's occurring.
Okay, if a woman finds herself in an abusive situation, what numbers can she call and where can she go to get help?
Again, we have a 24-hour hotline if she's been abused. It's 528-2121 for safe emergency shelter 24 hours a day. Also for access to our counseling programs, and that's for adult women. It's also for teen girls. We cannot shelter teen girls at our shelter, but we can provide counseling for them. There's also a nationwide number. It's 1-800-799-SAFE. It's a 24-hour hotline number. You can call and talk to someone if you want to remain anonymous. You can always do that also.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining the Jack Yates Community Forum. Please join us next time.